Chapter 2. No, I totally understand, Arch said. You came out here expecting to have to do a lot of work, but instead you have to drink wine and attend parties. I can see why you'd be upset. It's not like that. I kicked a rock out of the way. I wasn't sure where it had come from. The street was covered in sand compacted down under 1,000 hooves, and the walls around us could have been built yesterday. I couldn't see a dent or scratch on the stone. If it even was stone. The smooth finish was more like ceramic than worked stone. Arch snorted and patted me on the back. I immediately checked to make sure I still had my bag of bits. I'm just teasing you a little bit, sister. I can see you're not the same kind of pony as Princess Cadence. You like to be involved in the nitty-gritty. Me, I'm the same way. I'm not afraid to get my hooves dirty. I said. I kept glancing back. Something about the pony was making me feel like I was walking into a trap. Maybe it was the way she'd lured me out of the safe embassy and into what increasingly looked like the bad part of town, with trash shoved out of the way on every side. I swear at one point I spotted a skull. I guess part of me was hoping to meet Princess Cadence, but this is more interesting. Might work out good for both of us. Right. So when are you going to tell me what this is really about? I stopped walking, and Arch took a few more steps before she noticed and turned around. You got me wrong, sister. I just thought you looked like the kind of mayor who wanted to blow the worst party in the city and find something a little more honest. She winked. That's me in a nutshell. Honest and authentic. With a name you picked out of a hat. You know, my mother would be offended to hear you say that, Arch sighed. If you really wanna go back now, I ain't gonna stop you, but we're almost where we're going, and the way you're limping you might want to sit a spell and rest before you go. Fine, but if it's a trap? You don't seem like the kind of pony to fall for a trap. Besides, even if it is a trap, the best way to get out of a trap is to spring it, am I right? Arch grinned. Or just avoid it. She laughed and patted me on the back hard enough to make me stumble. Avoid it. Huh? With everything I've heard, you take things head on. Even Nightmare Moon. That caught me by surprise. Sure, it had been impossible to keep everything that happened during the Summer Sun celebration out of the papers, but as far as I knew, Celestia had managed to spin it so hard most ponies only heard about Luna's return and not anything leading up to it. How did you hear about that? I've got my sources. Don't worry, I ain't some kind of spy or nothin'. I just keep informed. That's pretty well informed. Arch walked off, looking back over her shoulder at me. Stick with me and I'll pass on some nice little morsels. I can be a great friend. Trust me. It was uphill to our destination, but the slope was gentle enough that I didn't really notice until Arch led me down sun-washed wooden stairs. Ragged boards lined the stairwell, holding back the sand that now loomed overhead. When there's a big sandstorm, it can dump a lot of grit on the city, Arch explained. The middle of the city, where all the rich ponies live? Streets are totally clear there. They shovel all of it to the edges and you end up with this, having to go spelunking to find the front door. I scraped sand off of the long buried wall. Under all the sediment was a trace of paint, worn designs and swirls of color that I couldn't quite make out. Where it had been sanded away, it left that pristine white stone I'd seen everywhere in the city. Why are all the buildings the same? I muttered. Arch knocked on the door, and it opened a crack, the pony inside peering out cautiously. Arch lit up her horn, providing a little more light in that dim hole. Hey? I decided to swing by to see how you were doing, Arch said, her tone hushed like she was afraid she'd wake some pony up. Heard a rumor that things went well. The door was thrown open, and the pony inside rushed out. I almost blasted them on instinct, but they just pulled Arch into a hug, bangles jingling when they moved. Oh Mulberry, it is so good to see you. Come, you must come in. The mare pulled on Arch's hoof, leading her inside. Arch nodded for me to follow, so I kept close. Immediately inside the doorway were thick curtains, and the moment they parted, the sound and smell hit me. Ponies were laughing, music was playing, and food was out in big shared dishes. It was a party, which at this point was almost the last thing I expected. Even the food smelled good. "Mulberry, I don't know what we'd have done without you," the mayor said. "Alferez wouldn't have made it through the week without the miracle you brought us." "That's good," Arch said, nodding. Or maybe her name was Mulberry. Or Jack, for all I knew. Whatever was going on, I was missing basically all of the context. "Hey, Sunset, why don't you try some of the food while I go have a chat with the guest of honor?" The Bengal-covered mayor giggled. "You are the guest of honor, Mulberry." Nah. I'm just a mayor who was in a place to help. Alferez is the one this party's really for." They walked off and their voices were swallowed by the music and distance. I could have cast a scrying spell to listen in, but it seemed a little rude. Instead, I took a look around, trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. The room wouldn't have been out of place in Canterlot, tall arched ceilings and smooth stone and an abstract mosaic on the floor that had been covered by dozens of mismatched, threadbare rugs, overlapping where they were worn entirely through. It reminded me a little of the orphanage. The building had been massive and ancient and there'd never been enough furniture to fill up the space. A lot of rooms had just been foals playing house with scraps and garbage. Would you like some food, miss?" a foal asked. They'd gotten up to me without me even noticing. Just for a moment, she reminded me of Applejack's little sister, and it tugged painfully at something inside me. "Maybe just a little," I said. She smiled and led me over to one of the big dishes. "You should try the chickpeas," the foal suggested. "Oh? And the paprika jam. It's so good on the naan." "Sure," I said, getting myself a little of everything. It would be rude not to at least try it, right? The foal watched with amazement as I levitated a dozen bite-sized treats around myself, like she'd never seen a unicorn using magic before. "So my friend didn't actually tell me what this party was for," I said. "It looks like every pony's having a fun time." "It's a party for Alferez," the filly said. She looked across the room and I followed her gaze to where Arch was patting a young mare on the back and smiling. It took me a few moments to realize where I'd seen them before. The mare had been at the docks when I'd arrived, though she'd been a few shades paler and coughing up blood at the time. "She looks like she's doing better," I said. "I thought she was sick. Maybe that guard hadn't been wrong when he said she'd been faking it." "She was," the filly said. "But she got better. My mom says it's because Miss Mulberry brought a wish to make everything okay again." "A wish, huh?" I didn't want to just tell the filly this, but wishing magic wasn't real. There was no such spell, no matter how powerful my guide was. Then again, with the ponies watching me eat, I got the distinct impression that most of them weren't really familiar with even simple magic, much less anything advanced enough to actually cure a disease. I took a bite without looking and spice filled my mouth, hot and sweet and fruity all at the same time. It made me think of Ponyville and hot sauce covered cupcakes. That shouldn't have led me down a dark path that soured the taste in my mouth. I forced myself to take a bite of something else, focusing on the stuffed date until I wasn't thinking about bouncing pink ponies. "Could you get me some water?" I asked. The filly ran off, and I gave the room a quick magical scan. Arch twitched a little when the beam passed over her, but no pony else even noticed it, the diffuse light of the spell barely visible in the room. Immediately I felt it. A knot of something tying the supposedly sick mare to the pony next to her. The way they held hooves, I guess they were lovers. That spell between them, though, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. If I had to describe it to the lay pony, I'd tell them to think of a big, pulsing heart pulling the blood out of the healthy pony and circulating it into the healing mare. It was invisible to the naked eye, but the power of the spell was enough that even after I stopped scanning I could feel a trace of it on my horn. Arch started towards me when the couple stopped her, offering her a small, ornate silver box. Arch shook her head and pushed it back into their hooves, whispering something to them and laughing in good humor before she made her way over. "So, you got a good look at it?" Arch asked, before I could say anything. "It's dark magic," I said, bluntly. "The spell is fueling itself on that stallion's magic." Arch nodded. "That's one way to look at it. What do you think's going to happen?" I bit back my immediate reaction and considered it, working through my thoughts out loud. He doesn't seem to be in any real danger. It's more like a transfusion than anything else. He's probably going to be a little weak, like he has the flu. But his wife is going to live, Arch said, finishing my thought. Transfusion is a good way to think of it. Glad I brought you along for a second opinion. You seemed like the right pony for the job. Because I'm a scary witch who does black magic? I guessed. Because you're Tia's favorite student, Arch said, patting me on the back again. Expert in practically anything. When I asked around about Sunset Shimmer, what ponies told me was that Sunset is a pony who knows darn near everything and never lets anything go until she's got answers for the rest. That's not what they told you. Well, it's the third or fourth thing they said. The first thing was that I shouldn't get involved, but that usually just means things are interesting. I've never seen dark magic like that. I glanced at her and did another quick scan. And you didn't cast the spell. Shocking, I know, but despite the rumors I'm not secretly running everything behind the scenes, she sighed and grabbed some bread, tearing into it and continuing with her mouth full. Glad to know they're going to be okay. They're a cute couple. So if Cadence had been here, would you have shown her the same thing? I asked. Nah. She wouldn't have ever left a party in her honor, Arch said. Princess Cadence is a soft touch, very polite. You know that better than any pony. Can you picture her drinking half a handle of vodka and yelling at ponies? No, I paused. That was inside the embassy. How in Tartarus did you know about that? Before Arch could answer, the door slammed open hard enough to crash off its hinges. Ponies jumped to their hooves and magic surged to my horn before Arch smacked the tip hard enough to disrupt whatever spell I'd been thinking of casting. Not a good time or place for a spell fight, sister, she said. Too many foals around. Come on. Arch pulled me into the maze of hanging sheets and curtains along the walls. The music stopped and ponies started yelling at each other, anger and confusion and fear mixing together into a wall of muffled sound. I looked at Arch and she put a hoof to her lips, silencing me. I glared at her and moved to try and get a look, peering through a gap in the wall of fabric to see what was going on. Ponies in uniform were pushing their way through the crowd. I didn't recognize the uniforms, but I did recognize the way they trotted and looked at the ponies in the room. They barked orders I couldn't make out through a solid inch of silk and shag and started forcing them up and out of the room. They got something like a zero-tolerance policy for black magic, Arch whispered. They're not as quick as you on the uptake, but they'll figure out what's going on soon enough. Only question is if they'll execute the mayor and her husband or just one of them. Execute? A chill ran down my spine. Maybe. This ain't Equestria, sister. The death penalty is still alive and kickin', and these two might get to see the bad end of it. There's no good end. Huh? Got that one right. Arch muttered. So what are you gonna do? You gonna jump in there and save 'em? You're more than strong enough to do anything you want. Toss them aside like dolls, be the big hero. You know you want to. Part of me did want that. But then I thought about the embassy. The treaty. All I had to do was smile and shake hooves. I had to not buck anything up. If I was caught, what would happen? It's not like I was afraid of going to prison. They probably didn't have a prison that could hold me. But being arrested would knock everything down like a house of cards. They'd call off the treaty. Princess Celestia would have to show up to bail me out and try to salvage things. I'd be a huge embarrassment to her, again, and this time I couldn't blame it on. I pushed that thought out of my head. It wasn't going to be like that. I was here because of what had happened in Canterlot, and that meant not making the same mistakes twice. I couldn't afford to take action now. "I didn't think you were afraid," Arch muttered. I looked back at a gaze that was disappointed, but not angry. Not even surprised. I wanted to say I wasn't, but the words caught in my throat, and a bead of sweat got into my eyes and I blinked before she did. "Let's get out of here before they notice us," Arch said. She reached into her robe and extracted a few glass spheres the size of marbles, swirling with white and black mist. Before I thought to ask her what they even were, she tossed them into the room and they erupted into smoke. Arch grabbed my hoof and dragged me into the haze. Somehow, she seemed to know where she was going, guiding me through the blinding smoke without slowing or doubling back. She must have had some kind of spell at the ready to let her see through the murk, the same way I kept fire resistance and basic protection spells active as protection against my own bad habits. Any pony whose first reaction to being surprised involved throwing a fireball didn't last long unless they took precautions against flash damage. Steps were under my hooves and I stumbled at the sudden change, almost falling on my face as I was dragged out into the street. And not the street we'd entered from. "Where are we?" I whispered, trying to catch my breath. I'd held it the whole way, just in case that was some kind of poison gas. "I don't like going anywhere without at least one back entrance," Arch said. She let go of my hoof and took out one of her black clove cigarettes, lighting it and taking a deep drag. Got to admit I didn't think the Heretic Order would find them so quickly. "You almost got me arrested." "Maybe," Arch admitted. "Not part of my plans, though. I wanted this to be a nice fun night for you. Gotta admit I thought for a minute there you were gonna tear that place up and teach those jerks a lesson. I don't even know what this Heretic Order is. I'm not going to start a fight when I'm..." Arch waved me off. Yeah. When you've got all of Equestria counting on you, right? I've heard it before. Ponies like to make all kinds of excuses instead of helping each other. Sometimes it's that they've got family back home counting on them, or a duty to country or honor or something like that. "I just don't want to mess up again," I muttered. "Ask the ponies who got arrested while you were watching if you messed up or not," Arch said, and I looked down at my hooves, mouth dry. "You should be able to make your way back to the embassy from here. I'm gonna go see if any of the irons in my fire can pull strings or something along those lines." I didn't look up. Arch got halfway down the block before she said anything else. "You know, something a pony told me once is that you can't learn unless you make mistakes. The trick is not giving up the first time you fail. And the other trick is not making the same mistakes twice," I said, from memory. "Princess Celestia used to say that all the time. How did you know that?" I looked up. Arch was so completely gone she might as well have teleported away. "Figures," I muttered. "I won't take my eyes off you next time." And it felt like there'd be a next time. I was already sure I'd be seeing her again. The good thing is that I did know how to get back to the embassy. Arch had given me the clue on the way here. The sand was piled up high in the bad parts of town on the edges of good society, so all I had to do was follow the gentle slope downhill and eventually I'd get there. At least that was the theory. It held up until 3 ponies stepped out in front of me just before I would have walked out into a main street, just black shapes against the lamplight in the thoroughfare beyond. "Miss Sunset Shimmer, I presume," said a clipped voice with a heavy accent. I lit up my horn to get a look at who I was facing, bright enough that I got to see them wince at the sudden flare. 2 of them were the same brand of thugs that had been rounding up ponies at the party. The third was in a much more ornate version of the same uniform, with so many silver chains and bangles that it was more like armor than decoration. She had a stern look to her and a face like a slab of marble, gray streaks running through her mane and creeping into her coat. "Who wants to know?" I demanded. If I was going to be arrested anyway, it was going to be for something worthwhile, like throwing some ponies so high they'd need to ask Luna to collect them from her moon. "I'll take that as a yes," the pony said, narrowing her eyes to focus on me through the glare. "I am Sirocco Mundala, head of the Heretic Order. This is a very dangerous time to be out and about. Is it? I asked. I heard Saddle Arabia was one of the safest places in the world. Every nation wants to pretend that they are safe. There are always dangers in the shadows. She was still standing between me and the street. I could get past them without trying, but the last time I'd fled from custody it had ended really poorly. I was just heading back to the embassy anyway, I said. I needed a walk to clear my head. It was a long trip. I'm sure it was, Sirocco said. She kept staring at me with that expression that said she could see right through every lie and half-truth I tried to put between us. I hope you've been able to do just that. It's good to be very clear on where we stand. You have a reputation, Miss Shimmer. A reputation for causing trouble. I didn't know I was so famous. I'd swear more ponies have heard of me in Saddle Arabia than in Equestria. Don't take it as flattery. It's my business to know about potential threats. Really? I'd love to compare notes. Of course we would be happy to provide the embassy with literature on local monsters, though they are never seen this close to the city. Sirocco kept staring. Didn't ponies around here ever blink? If you were hoping to see our files on you, my job is not to feed your near-legendary ego. I hope they say good things. I'm just here to sign a treaty. Yes. And if you are wise, that is all you'll do. Sirocco took a step forward, lowering her head slightly as if imparting a secret. There is dark magic at work. If you were not an ambassador I would detain you too. Assist with the investigation. Diplomatic immunity makes that impossible, for now. I'd be happy to help when I have free time. You can send your notes along to the embassy along with those books on monsters you mentioned. I've always loved learning. Indeed. Will do so. I would be very happy to have your help in cleaning up this mess. Sirocco stood up straight again, like her spine was a steel beam and bending slightly had been a great effort. I will be watching you closely. For your own safety. I can watch myself. Don't worry. My officers can be very subtle. You won't even know they're there. I promise you that. Would you like an escort back to the embassy? I can find my own way back. As you wish. Travel safely and in the light, Sunset Shimmer. She stepped aside, and I stepped past them into the main street without a word, feeling like a target had been painted on my back. I swear, I grumbled. The next time a mysterious pony tries to be coy and clever with me, I'm going to set them on fire.